Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. I hope you are enjoying your time in Tirana, or you are abroad. Weather is unluckily not very good, and this is abnormal for this day of the year. We celebrate the summer day on 14th of March. Some countries celebrate it in 1st of May, for example, but it depends on the latitude. My name is George Ibarra. I work for MIAP organization. Basically, I am a journalist with a master's degree in economic history, and I'm going to talk today about how to monitor government budget, how to identify the sensitive statistics, and how to make an argument out of statistics. Statistics are usually considered boring, but if you can enter in them and see what happens behind the statistics, then they become pretty much nice, they become pretty much expressive, and it is said that figures never lie, but the problem is that if you find out the true figures of what you need to make an argument. So basically, we are talking about political business cycle. It's a theory developed by Nordhaus in 1975. There are two American economists. One is well-known economic historian, Nordhaus. He is in the books of economic history everywhere. The idea is that basically the presidents in the United States before the election use the influence in the Congress and in the Federal Reserve, in the central bank, in order to pump up the economy and to get some benefits from voters in that way. And obviously they had to deal with the consequences with the damage that they have created by that once they are back in office. And we have an electoral campaign now in Albania, and it looks like very much like wedding and funerals. The government is going to elections in like a kind of weddings ceremony, while the opposition is going to say like condolences, your beloved person is dead, but we are going to live with that, and we're going to. Basically, they say that there is a miracle. The opposition says that there is a miracle that is going to happen in the election day. The government says that the miracle is already here, but you are blind and you can see it. And the unanswered question always here is where the money will come from. MIAP movement started to monitor the government budget and the ministries in 2008. With three aims: to identify political speculation in the budget, to make the government accountable, and to raise awareness among the population about economic realities and what is possible and what is not. The main tools are two. One is qualitative analysis. We have to monitor what happens before the election with government budget, with public assets. And in this case, we find out in the case of Albania that the government sells public properties before the election, to pay up its bills, create a bomb in the economy, and deals with the consequences after. We have seen also that it increased wages and pensions before the elections, much more than the economics can allow it. And it is followed in the year after the elections with tax increases and inflation increases in some countries. The descriptive statistics are the basic statistics used. You can use only graphs or simple presentations. In this case, you don't need to use the analytical statistics, because we are talking about how to explain people, and people doesn't get so much with the analytic statistics. So we are basically using simple descriptive statistics to identify where the budget miscalculation or misuse the budget misuse is shown in the figures of the government. And in this case, we have a problem because the devil lies in the details instead, and the major figures in the revenue and expenditure often doesn't show the mismanagement of the budget. You have to go down to specific data sets, to specific clauses of the government expenditures to find out. To identify sensitive statistics, we should keep in mind that every country has its specifics. There are some countries that have some social programs that are used to gain electoral votes, and there are some countries that has other programs. For example, in Eastern Europe, in the last 20 years, we have seen a lot of wage increases as the main tool, and this is because the public sector in Eastern countries inherit from the time of communism is very large by the today international standards, and it means that government can buy a lot of votes by increasing salaries. But another point is increasing pensions. In all Eastern countries, the pension system bankrupt in early 90s, so an entire generation went to have a pension, a retirement with few money, and that is a very political sensitive issue. But basically, when we talk about elections, the budget deficit and public debt are the main data that we can find political speculation out of the public budget. This is a graph basically of Albania public debt. The election years are in red. We see in 2001, the first line is 2001 basically, and we show very large public debt. The second red line is 2005, another election years, and we show also another bump in public debt. The third line is 2009 elections, and the fourth line is this year elections. These are data from IMF. IMF has data for all the countries around the world, and it's easy to see. I have made an experiment with few countries last few days, and it sees that you can see elections years in every country basically, simply by looking at the public debt as percent of GDP. In case of Albania, we also discovered that there is a political misuse of wages and pension hikes, privatization of public companies to fund expenditures, tax increases in the immediate year following elections, former political prisoners compensation delivered just 1 or 2 months before the elections. Albania has a huge problem with the former political prisoners. There are about 50,000 people that were in prison or in concentration camps during communism, and the government likes to play with them just a few months before the election, deliver some money to them and forget the question after the election for a few years, and comes back with that every time that there is election. And we have seen also political bias in grant transfer to local governments, as every government, I guess, in Eastern Europe. Albania is a very centralized country. The central government controls the majority of the budget, and it delivers some small budgets to the local governments. The local governments are often in the hands of the opposition or in the hands of the governments, and those who are in the hands of the governments get more. To fight such a bias, we have to take into account the number of population living in the municipalities ruled by the opposition and those ruled by the government. And we have seen about 10% discrepancy in the level of the local transfers. This is basically converted in more votes, and you can see how the voting results will change in the local elections, basically, only because of government transfers. These are very small data. They are very, very small figures, basically in the terms of national budget. It is just about 2 or 3% of the total expenditures. But if we see all the total expenditures, it doesn't show political bias. But if we see the certain figure, like the transfers to local municipalities, then it shows where the speculation is. And we have also another very small part of the budget is the pensions for rural areas. Pensions in rural areas in Albania are currently just 50 euros per month, and the government can put few money in them to gain votes. And we see, for example, in 2001, a sharp increase in rural pensions, in 2005 as well. In 2006, it's not an election year, but it's an election promise carried by the government during the previous elections. And in 2009, it's just visible, descriptive statistics, very visible for our purpose. And this is the graph of basically we have compared wage increases year on year with the government revenues increases. And we see in the last few years during the crisis, the wage increase is much higher than the government revenue increases. It means basically that the government is paying wage increases by issuing new debt. And we have made some recommendations to the parties, basically to implement expenditure breaks in wages and pension increases in correlation to the rate of growth in government revenues. This became a public debate in Albania, and we had two reactions. The Prime Minister had to go out to protect its policy of wage increases by saying that we have never borrowed money to pay for wages and pension increases, we borrow money only for public investments. And there is an MP from the opposition that says that it is better to suffer today than to leave behind debt to our children. The desirable result in our job in monitoring governmental expenditures is to make voters aware about what is realistic and what is unrealistic in a campaign place, to have the political debate oriented toward issues that are too important, like budget deficit and public debt can be hard to understand by the general population, and to make political parties more modest and realistic on their campaign place. The complications is that politicians use less facts and more senseless words in their rhetoric, or often when there is no miracle in economic terms, they run to another ideologies like nationalism and hatred, and so there is a lot of complication out of that is all folks. We are open for questions.
Now or after the second presentation?
Whatever you like.
Can you go back to the slide with the Prime Minister reaction?
Yeah.
Did you evaluate these statements with the truth meter or no?
Basically,
it will be really interesting to see, because you presented some other results and they said something completely opposite of your results.
He had to defend his policies against our critics. So we made the politics aware about what is going on, and he has to defend it.
This is the content that you should have launched the truth meter with.
Yeah.
This is something that you should send, like a grade to the media from the truth meter, because it's
basically we are helping the media, helping the NGO sector. So we publish it in the media as well.
It's not a question. I mean, it
Yeah.
Okay.
Another question?
I don't know. I mean, how do you disseminate your results? How do you make impact? How is media willing to pick up your stories or your side of the story?
Well, usually media is divided in opposition and government. The opposition media catch everything that goes to criticize the government, and the government media takes everything that is going to criticize the opposition. So we had the possibility to publish basically everything that we need.
But you simplify the narrative to be understandable for the ordinary citizens.
Simplifying the narrative is the key issue. Because, for example, in the case of Albania, we don't say that 1% of GDP increase in public debt. We say that 1% of GDP means 100 million euro, and people can get the concept of how much money makes 1% of GDP. Because otherwise, no one would gonna. 1% is a small figure in terms of.
Do you have some kind of visualization of the data that you
Yeah, this is,
gained?
for example, rural percent.
I mean, for the citizens, when you present the results to the citizens, do you have some kind of other more like appealing
We use
visualization, like
you-
infographics or
yeah,
something
graph-
like that?
graph,
Some special platform for that?
simple graphics is what is needed. You just have to make sure that they see that there is election years.
And this is publicly available on your website?
There are a lot of data publicly available. The problem is how to collect this data because
No,
they are
I mean the
divided.
research, the results from the research are publicly available,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
We can download them if we want on your
Right.
website. And they're available in English or no, only Albanian?
Both.
Both?
Albanian.
Okay.
Google Translate.
No, I have colleagues that understand Albanian,
Yes,
so it's
yes.
not a problem.
Yes.
That's
The
it.
growth rates of revenues and wages,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you have a timeline there.
Time lag.
Timeline.
Yes, if you like,
Yeah. For
do
example-
something with the data, maybe you
For
will.
example, the question is that elections doesn't happen in certain part of the year. Here is 2000. In October there were held local elections, and 6 months later general elections.
Yeah, what I wanted to tell you is that if you move the revenues just 1 year behind, you will maybe have more like similar developments with I think revenues may be following, or wages may be following on revenues, or revenues may be following on wages.
Yeah.
So what I see here is that from like, I don't know, from the table here, like 10 meters away, that there is some kind of similarity that they are following in a way.
Yeah. They're following in time lag, but there is also.
Which is good because in Bosnia they don't. They keep the wages as they are.
The problem is that there are many factors that affect revenues and expenditures in the government, and if we see just two graphs, we have to take into account other factors. For example, in 2002, there is a sharp drop in revenues, but there is an electricity crisis. It's not related to the elections, basically. It is natural causes. And if we see here in 2009, 2011, there is not really an electoral campaign issue. It's basically international financial crisis. So we have to take into account other factors that affects revenues and expenditures.
Yeah, the same happens like 2011, 2012 is what we have now. The sharp decrease in revenues, but the wages stay the same.
The wages increase. This is a year-on-year increase on wages, on public wages, on average.
Did you just publish in media, or
Absolutely. We
did you
publish.
get any other action after you did publish in
The-
media, or you just
Basically, it works like the opposition here is doesn't care to find data. It doesn't work to anything. So it picks up everything that goes out in the newspapers and turns it in the public debate. It's silly, but it's what is happening.
So the main problem seems to be how to reach
Yeah, the general public is
public that
main
is
problem.
not anyway in opposition, so.
Absolutely. The main
did you
public.
do any follow-up, not just publishing, organizing a press release, publishing the data gathered? but not taking any other action which would somehow disseminate the data you have.
Can you advertise in pro-government media? Can you advertise? Can you pay advertorial
No,
in a
no,
pro-government
they
media?
are too expensive because all the media in Albania lives with the money of the mobile phone companies basically. They have a monopoly here, so they don't need money for all the services. But there is internet now, and nothing can stay in the silence. The problem is how to make clear the message and how to organize the ideas that you are explaining to the general public.
During the research, did you find any contradiction between the data offered by government structures and from other international?
It depends on the data. For example, the data of public debt as percent of GDP, they are different in the IMF database and different in the government. Because the government usually tries to overestimate the GDP growth in the following years in order to justify an increase in expenditures. And the IMF has its own projections that says that the growth will not be as high as the government says, and as a result the debt will increase more than the government says. The data on financial reports from the governments are certified by the IMF for every country, and they are using the United Nations standards of reporting, financial reporting, so there is no problem with the data. It's just the general data, so the political business cycle basically was invented by a Russian named Kondratyev, and he used simple data to show business cycles. Now the world is looking to more detailed data. They manipulate the data in order to show the jump up and down the economy. It's not visible in the main data. It's not visible in the government revenues because there are many factors that affect the government revenues. It's not just election. Any other question? Suggestion?
Do you have any other allies? Is MMF collaborating with World Bank or EU? Do you have EU delegation here?
Yeah, we have.
Do you have a shadow reporting, like that government presents one thing to EU and then civil society presents contradictionary?
Well, the problem with the financial data is that basically no one cares about manipulating them. The government doesn't care about manipulating GDP per capita, public debt as percent of GDP because the general public won't understand it. So it's our duty to explain to the. It's another issue is the inflation data, for example. That is a big problem that we can't monitor. We can't have another National Institute of Statistics to produce alternative data on inflation. But some countries can make public the database of prices that they collect, and basically there is a possible way, if you have the database, to control the data, to control the way in which they calculate the inflation. But basically there are some data that are politically sensitive, and for example, GDP forecast is politically sensitive in Albania, and it is basically much higher than the IMF estimates. But you have an alternative when it comes to the estimates. When it comes to the inflation, then you don't have an alternative.
But you got Instat, right?
Sorry?
You got Instat.
Yeah, we have the National Institute of Statistics, and the problem is that
Because the leader of the opposition.
it doesn't fit the figures that they publish that goes contrary to the logic. For example, Albania has a 12% devaluation of its currency in 2009, and the inflation data just show a 1% increase. So it's not possible for a country that imports 2/3 of what is consumed to have a 10% increase in prices of import because of devaluation of the national currency, and to have in the end 1% increase in prices. But this is just a theory, because we can't basically measure another in price inflation. So there are limits to our job.
Because Study Berisha uses, data
Absolutely.
of the
We have information, for example, that the GDP estimates, the flash estimates of the GDP are controlled first by the Prime Minister and then published to the media. And we have basically compared the flash estimates of the GDP with the final estimates, and we show that every time the flash estimates are higher than the final estimates. It's not a statistical issue, it's not a statistical problem, because if it was a statistical problem with the methodology, etc., it will show sometimes higher and sometimes lower. But if it shows every time higher, then we can say that, I'm sorry, but when it is a political issue, for example, the growth of the last 3 months, it is important for the government to say that it's 5% and not 1%. But after a few years, it becomes an old story and no one cares to manipulate against and against. And there is also, the statistics works as a cross-check, because if you see a 5% increase in the GDP declared by the government, then you should see a 5% increase in the government revenues at least. And you can compare data and say that, well, something is missing here.
What's the percentage of Albanian public debt to GDP? And what is the structure?
Currently, it is about 65%.
And the structure of it?
It's about 2/3 domestic and 1/3 foreign, in foreign currency. But the majority of that is from IMF and World Bank, and it doesn't compose a problem with the market.
You said domestic currency, is that domestic debt?
Yeah.
2/3.
Yeah.
Then what's the structure of that?
What means in maturity terms?
No, to whom do you owe?
No. Okay. There is the central bank that controls about 20%. There is the commercial banks that controls about 70%, and about 10% is general public.
So commercial banks are also
Commercial
foreign?
banks has a monopoly on that, especially one bank, which is Raiffeisen International.
So they're mainly foreign banks, actually.
We have only foreign banks, but just the domestic banks has about 6% of the market here.
So we're talking about public debt?
Public debt.
Okay,
Government debt, basically.
yes, okay. So you have mostly, you are owing money to foreign countries?
No, they are basically local deposits used to buy public debt.
Well, yeah.
It's
like
not,
you
it's
say,
not that they have taken money from Austria to buy public debt here.
But you're gonna pay the interest
Absolutely,
to them?
yeah. It's very hard, very high interest rates, it's about 8% in average, so.
Yeah. And do people know about it?
Well, people doesn't we have very few understanding of the economics in general.
And how is the procurement of money works? Is this transparent process when, I don't know, city or area or government wants to borrow money? Is there a bidding between banks? Is there
We have only general government debt, we don't have municipality debt.
Mhm.
And it's pretty transparent in terms of, there is a tender in the central bank, but the problem is that 40% of the market is controlled by just one bank.
And which one is it?
It's Raiffeisen International.
Yeah, the same, like, and you know who owes the Raiffeisen?
Also,
Yeah, but who has the major stake in
I
Austria?
don't know.
It's actually divided between the regional
Oh, yeah, yeah,
but
it's a cooperative bank.
No, it's it's political influence.
Every business in that level is political.
But actually Austrian
Yes.
one of the Austrian political parties.
It was said in, okay, we are running out of time.
Yes, sorry.
We can discuss later about.
And you can find everything about how to get the data.
Yeah.
In English and English language.
Sorry, didn't.
On
You can find
on their portal, there are details
Aha,
about public debt.
that's great.
And it's not everything, but no one is reacting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Olga Begu and I work as public finance expert in Open Data Albania.
Hello everyone, I'm Artemisa Miali and I work as a software developer in the team of Open Data Albania.
Okay, we will talk with you about Open Data Albania project, open data definition, open data as a new standard in democracy, different data and budget data, data comparison, open data from civil society versus open data from the government, very interesting. Analyze and compare the data, and open data journalism and open data activism. The NGO that I represent, Albanian Institute of Science, has been working for 2 years in creating a portal and a movement for open data Albania, because open data are a very important moment for opening governments. In fact, from December 2010, a group of specialists from Albania, from files, software developers and semantic web specialists, public finance experts, also experts of public communications, etc., are working together for Open Data Albania, and our donor is Open Society Foundation Soros.
Firstly, we think it's important to explain what open data are. So open data are open knowledge. With open knowledge we can understand that we can with open knowledge we can understand any content or information or data that we are completely free to use, reuse, distribute without any legal, technological or social restriction.
And in fact, open data is not only a new technical standard of publishing. Open data is a new philosophy and a new practice. Open data is a new standard of democracy and needs to make people understand better how the government works, and also this is done in order to ensure reaction and participation.
In the last line we can read that open governmental data are very important. Why they are very important? They are very important because they are closely related with transparency, are closely related with civil activism and advocacy process, and most of all they are connected with including people in making decisions, and also in creating opportunities and for a better governance. That is very important. Taking all this in mind and having all this present, we have created a very important portal here in Albania that is Open Data Albania, a portal that you all can find online in open.data.al. Is a very dynamic website that all the studies and data are visualized and published and joined together with analyses that are made by our professional economists. You can find different kind of information, economical information, informations about health, environment, criminality, public debt, etc.
And this data in fact reflects directly the Albanian economy and society. But in fact, budget data or open budget is very important for our societies. But more important, we think that that is more than publication or visualization of the budget is to compare the data of this budget with other indicators that are related with them and which shows standards, really standards of government and standards of our lives. So not only to visualize the budget, but also to make in evidence the importance of the data of budget with other indicators.
Following this logic that we have said already, it's very important to compare the data. So we, in this moment, Open Data Albania is able not only to achieve data for the Albania, but also to compare this data with the other countries of the region. So to compare the data with Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Turkey, Greece, etc. So countries that really are the same in this region, and to compare how they the data are in the different times. So we have a study that we have made in Open Data Albania that is a study about the unemployment rate and in Albania and the regional comparison. So referring to this study, we can see that Albania is ranked in the 5th position, where in the first position is Macedonia with 33%, Bosnia and Herzegovina with 24%, Serbia with 17.4%, and Turkey with 14%, while after Albania, that is ranked in the 5th position with 13%, the ranking is as follows, with Montenegro with 11% and Greece with 9.4%. So we can compare countries, and not only for 1 year, we can compare for how this employment rate has changed through years, starting to the year 2000 and until now in 2011. In Open Data Albania, you can find articles that has put graphics, some comparative analysis on various indicators for different Balkan countries.
And in addition, in fact, during these 2 years, we built Open Data audience, Open Data community. In fact, in the beginning of Open Data Albania, the idea was presented and firstly assimilated for the Albanian journalists, and then from all the students of all Albanian universities and academic bodies also.
Yes, it's true, and also the citizen activists can understand that the open data, but not only the data that they can find in Open Data Albania, but the open data as a concept can help them in succeeding in their campaigns.
Okay. Let's talk now about a very interesting theme, which is open data portals built from independent experts and open data portals built from governments. And this is especially important in countries that have young democracies like Balkan countries and like Albania especially. And sure, the Albanian government will firstly publish data on growing number of internet users, growing number of tourists that visit Albania, etc. So data that in the most of the cases will be data of success. But what is for sure is that Albanian government will never publish data like we do and like the one that also Artemisa will present to you right now.
The data that Olga is talking about are the data that we have published about maternal mortality. That is a very sensitive issue and a very sensitive topic, not only for Albania but also for all the other countries. And we can see from this study that compared with Europe, is 5 to 7 mothers per 100,000 live births, while in Albania is 31 per 100,000 live births. Let me say that is so 5 times higher. And even compared with the region, Albania has a very negative indicator. It ranks as the country with high maternal mortality in the region. In our country, the mortality of mothers per 100,000 births is 2 times higher than in Montenegro, 4 times higher than in Macedonia, and 15 times higher than in Greece for the same number of live births.
But why Albania has the most negative indicators in the region? In fact, there are so many factors, but Albania is the mostly related with total budget per capita on health. And Albania, in fact, is the last on the list with $549 per capita, with a big, in fact, difference with the second one, which is Macedonia, at 30% less than Macedonia. And Montenegro stands even farther, you can see. Farther, with a total budget per capita on health twice bigger than Greece, that tops the list with a very budget 5 times higher. Also, you can see, so Albanian government will never be interested in new technologies or to encourage people to look at data in a transparent manner, such as this concrete visualization. You can see, we see less budget per capita on health, more mothers which dies.
So we would really encourage open data journalism, because with this open data journalism we help people to understand better how they are governed, to understand where their money goes and how they are governed, help activists to fight more for money for public health, and why not to encourage policymakers to try for better governance.
And in fact, it is the duty of civil society to help people have more knowledge and to be part of process of better governance. Because the data, we say the data is power, so let's use them. What we would suggest as a closure of our speech is use open data as a weapon in helping people understand, react, and more than all, participate.
It would be necessary to encourage open data journalism, open data activism in all countries, but mostly in Balkans. Thank you.
Thank you. We are open for that.
Which one we should address first?
You can address the question first and then...
No, I'm quite aware that we live in the age of information, and sometimes if we have a lot of information, it's very hard to process those informations, and
Yes.
how hard it is
I
for
understand.
random people, when they got so much.
I completely
Information.
understand. It's true. It is very difficult to choose the right information and to manage the right information, because it's true that we have huge information nowadays, so it's difficult to choose the right one. But we have a really specialist team. We have economists that work only in the sector of selecting the correct data that we are going to publish in our portal. And then we have another team that is completely focused on, we have journalists too, that they are, we all know that journalists have their own information, so the source that they get the information. And also we have another team that shows, another group of persons that shows the most sensitive article or study to publish, that is the most sensitive for Albania, for example, the example of maternal mortality that we explained before, that is very sensitive because it's a very high difference from the other countries of the region. So we make this choosing on information very carefully.
And there was a law also in the Prime Minister that supported, that thought that Albania has a very low maternal mortality rate and said that something that we have
Yeah,
the
this is
lowest in the
Yeah, they
Western
say
Europe.
that.
But it's not
It's
actually
not true.
about this.
And those data just helped people to understand. The data already published when the Prime Minister go out and said that
To be
people had
transparent,
to.
to people to understand what is going on really and how the truth is really, and not only what is official and what comes from government. What we often listen in the TV.
I opened your website and I was like a suggestion to add to your
Yeah, you're welcome.
presentation.
Yeah.
Is it possible to show us your website and how, not on the PowerPoint presentation, but to open the website on the computer and to go through the content that you have published on the website and to show us how you present
Yeah,
the
we,
comparations of the data between different countries to
Yeah.
the citizens and on the
Yeah,
website.
yeah.
Because I couldn't find how to make a comparison of data on my own if I want.
Yeah, of course.
If it's possible, I think it will be quite useful.
We are part of the information. Was a question here before about the graphics, about the visualization.
That's why I asked.
Yes, we
it's
have.
possible to show us.
We have a part of the articles.
Okay, this is in English too. And topics, you can find what kind of topics you want and have everything about health, education, past tense. You can search by words or you can see the first page that we published in the strength that are more